Dear students, today I am going to talk to you about the Varna Jati formulation in early medieval Indian society. The social structure of early medieval India was not really free from contradictions. There was a kind of stratification in the society which was a result of this Varna Jati formulation. As a result of this stratification, it was invariably the higher class or the upper classes of the social order who got the maximum amount of benefit, not only in the context of social prestige and power or facilities, but also from the context of financial advantages, as they could maximize the revenue from this framework. Now, I come to the definition of Varna and Jati. The term Varna, theoretical classification based on occupation, and Jati is defined as caste. These are definitely two distinct and different concepts. Manusmriti describes the ranks of Varna as a fourfold order and outlines the occupations and duties or dharmas of each category. And what are these categories? These categories are Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. Now, I would like to draw your attention to the views of anthropologist as well as sociologist Andre Bethel. According to Andre Bethel, in the classical literature of India, caste was presented as Varna for at least 2000 years, the way that was written by the Hindus. But gradually, in the long run, the Varnas were superseded by Jati or its equivalent in regional languages. The displacement of Varna by Jati, according to Bethel, was not a simple linguistic displacement. According to him, it had a broader perception and a deep social root. Bethel is further referring to the path-breaking essay of M.N. Srinivas called Varna and Caste. Here, it can be noted that Srinivas replaces with the term caste the designation of Jati, at least by implication. Srinivas is a critic of the Varna model, and he is arguing against the Indological representation of caste as Varna. In his opinion, the fourfold Varna model is wrong and it produces a distorted version of the Indian social order. Next, I'll talk to you about the viewpoint of historian Upinder Singh. In the opinion of Upinder Singh, the concept of Varna and Jati often get confused and it gets mixed with each other. Varna has a fixed order and ranking. On the other hand, Jati is more or less, it has got more fluidity and ambiguity as such. Besides, the number of Jatis, including the castes and the subcastes, are numerous, while the Varna has only got 4 folds or 4 divisions. Again, Varnas are not endogamous units since there are a number of inter-Varna Anuloma Jatis. On the other hand, Jatis are supposed to be endogamous. Further, Varnas are supposed to be associated with a specific type of occupation, and Jatis, at least in the beginning or in the initial stage, were not so. According to Professor Singh, Jati system anchored itself to the Varna order in order to get a kind of a legitimacy, a shade of legitimacy, and therefore Varna and Jati may share close connotation but are certainly not identical. Now I come to the structure of the early medieval Indian society. The concept of the early medieval Indian society divided into just 4 Varnas influenced the perception of the early medieval theorists. However, it is indeed difficult to correlate this inflexible, watertight social framework if we really want to get a complete picture of the social system of this specific period. Such a rigid structure created certain limitations in the understanding of the social organization of this period. A specific attempt has been made to divide the society into 2 classes. One, the Dijas, or literally the twice born ones, and the second class is the Adijas, or the literally non-twice born ones. The Dijas usually refer to the Brahmins and the Adijo usually refer to the Shudras. However, in this context, one can raise the question that what is happening to the other castes, that is to say the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, or several other intermediary castes. Early medieval Bengal and the Tamil-speaking areas saw such a situation. So this binary demarcation, that is the division of the social order only between the Dijas and the Adijas, cannot really give a complete picture of the early medieval Indian society. The lawgivers of early medieval times could identify the fact that the number of jatis were continuously increasing. This can be explained in terms of the multiple matrimonial combinations and permutations within the fourfold Varna structure. The jatis are, or more appropriately, the Mishra jatis, according to the Vedic literature, numbered 8 in addition to the 4 Varna. In Manu Samhita, the number increased to 60. The Vaijayanti, which is a text of the early medieval time, the number is mentioned as 64 jatis. And this fact that the existence of 64 jatis is corroborated by Kalhana's chronicle, the Raj Tarangini. Now, how this 64 jati is framed? This can be explained in the following way. There are the 4 basic Varnas, and added to these were the 12 offsprings of Onulom and Pratilom marriages and 48 offshoots arising out of further combinations. Through this entire process, the 4 Varnas were incorporated and identified with the jatis. Early Dharma Shastras and occasionally the early Buddhist texts also describe the Brahmana both as Varna as well as Jati. For a proper assessment of the nature of the early medieval society, it is necessary to decipher the importance of the Jati system. That is to say, only the fourfold Varna order cannot highlight the specific features of the social order. The Jati system has also to be taken into proper consideration. The Brihad Dharma Purana, which is text assigned to the early medieval times, refers to a case in Bengal where there are existence of 36 Adijo jatis. However, the number of jati is in the text. If you go through the text thoroughly, we find that the number of these Adijo jatis are actually 41, including 20 high or Uttama Shankara and 12 intermediary or Madhyam Shankara and 9 low or Adhama Shankara jatis. So these are all Shankara jatis or Misra jatis, which are a product of these Onulom and Pratilom marriages. Over and above these Adijo jatis, there were various types of Brahmins also, again subdivided into so many groups and gotras. Historians often regard the number of 36 in context of Bengal as a kind of a stereotype which is supported by the name of one village. And what is the name of this village? The name of this village is Brihatchhattivarna. That is a village where 36 major social groups resided. This is also corroborated by a copper plate belonging to the early medieval times. These 36 groups are described as Vamas, and earlier such term was used to signify distinguishable social categories. So, in context of these discussions, I can refer to an eminent historian Romila Thapar's opinion. Romila Thapar has pointed out that the four-Varna model was theoretically and ideally acceptable, but jati was a practicable category. So, Romila Thapar is also accepting the fact that the fourfold Varna system had to be accommodated somewhere within the increasing importance of the jatis. Now, I'll come to the opinion of Marxist historian Ramcharan Sharma and his analysis of this Varna Jati order. According to Professor Sharma, land grants and sub-infeudation resulted in unequal distribution of land and power on a large scale and created new social groups which went beyond the rigid structure of the fourfold Varna order. Several texts on this issue made an attempt to coordinate social ranking based on birth vis-a-vis based on possession of land and property and power. R.S. Sharma refers to several literary sources in order to build up his argument. First, he refers to the Brihat Samhita written by Baraha Mihir. Baraha Mihir specified the houses of different sizes for different types of ruling chiefs, and as well as those who are belonging to different Varnas. Now, these ruling chiefs may or may not belong to the specific fourfold Varna order. Another text, the Mayan Mata, which is an early medieval text, focuses more elaborately on the detailed layout than the Brihat Samhita of Baraha Mihir. This text indicates that the emperor should possess an 11-storied house, the Dijo, that is the Brahmin, a 9-storied building, a king or a Nripo, a 7-storied one, a Vaishya or the military captains, the 4-storied, the Samanta Pramuko, a 5-storied building, and finally the Shudras should have houses ranging from 1 to 3 stories. Now, this difference in the size of the residential buildings refers to the difference in the social prestige and social powers of the different ranks of the people. And not necessarily all these ranks belong to the fourfold Varna system. Some literary texts do not give much cognizance to the Varna factor, and they put importance on the status of the feudal lords and the nobles. The Aparajita Pracha, written by Bhatta Bhuvanadeva, which is a product of the 12th century CE, is one such text. It specifies the size of the residence of nobles of 9 categories. 9 categories of nobles, including Mahamandaleshwara, Mandala, Mahashamanta, Shamanta, Loghu Samanto, and so on. It also refers to 8 categories of feudal vassals. This book further recommends that the emperor who holds the title of Maharajadhiraja Parameshwara should command over at least 4 Mandaleshwars, 12 Mandalikas, 16 Mahasamantos, 32 Samantos, 160 Loghu Samantos, and 400 Chaturashikas in his court. Below this order stood the Rajaputras. However, whether the feudal chiefs belonged to the Kshatriyas or to other Varnas is not very clearly mentioned in this text, that is in this Aparajita Prachya. While referring to the stratified social system in early medieval India, I'd also like to draw your attention to the hierarchization in religious structures in the context of Buddhism. The Vajrayana sect of Buddhism, which was popular in northwestern India, talked about social hierarchy based on 4 gradations, where the pantheon was constructed as a pyramid with 25 bodhisattvas at the base, headed by 7 Manushi or mortal Buddha, who in turn were presided over by 5 Dhyani or meditating Buddhas. And finally, at the top of the pantheon, we find that there was this Vajra Sattva, symbolizing the supreme or the paramount power. Therefore, the structure reflected a divine social ladder with 4 stratas of the Buddhist belief. So, this hierarchization in the religious structure was a kind of a fallout of the social order, we can say. Now, coming to the hierarchization in the actual social structure. Higher-ups in the social ladder, they could carry several symbols and emblems of power. For example, in the Deccan, we find that the higher landed gentry were given a kind of a badge which they could wear on their forehead, apart from the land grants that were given to them. The vassals, in the opinion of Professor R.S. Sharma, were endowed with different type of symbols like fly whisks, umbrellas, horses, elephants, palanquins, and so on. Some of the vassals and officials were empowered to use 5 kinds of musical instruments, a privilege exclusively belonging to the sovereign only. The Chakravartin, the Mahasamantas, and the Samantas, they could construct Singhodar or the principal gate in front of their house. But such facility was not given to the lesser vassals. All these insignia of social status seem to have been confirmed without much weightage to the Varna order. Those who held high military and political ranks on account of their landed positions were entitled to these signs of social ranking. Varna had nothing to do with that. During this period, artisans and merchants were also recipients of feudal titles befitting to their military and administrative ranks. Apart from the artisans and merchants, another community was gaining grounds, gaining importance during this period, and they are known as the scribes or the Kayastha community. During the early medieval era, we can find frequent transfer of land or landed revenues by princes to the priests, temples, to officials, and so on. And these required a large number of written works. That is, it had to be documented. And the writers and the record keepers of such documents, those who drafted the documents, those who kept records of these documents were known as the Kayasthas, Karanas, Karanikas, Lekhakas, or Chitraguptas. At the initial level, the literate members of higher Varnas were recruited as kayasthas or scribes to look into the fiscal and the administrative matters of the community. We can learn from Kalhana's Raj Tarangini that the Brahman Shivaratha was appointed a kayastha official. So kayastha at this point of time was not really a caste, it was a kind of a profession. Again, Lokanatha, who enjoyed Brahmana ancestry from the paternal side, was a Karana. That is, he was also a scribe. However, with time, these scribes recruited from the higher Varnas, they severed ties with their parent Varnas, and in the context of marriages and other social interactions, they began to build up a definite place in the society of their own. They were no longer prepared to acknowledge their connection with the higher Varnas as such, and they wanted an independent status. This community built up a new social structure and practiced class endogamy. As a result, to place castes within the set fourfold Varna system becomes difficult. Sometimes they are connected to the Shudras, or sometimes to the Dijas, or maybe some other communities. Due to the rise of the castes as a professional class, the importance of the Brahmanas sort of declined and their monopoly as writers or scribes diminished. It was the castes who served as ministers for the Chandelas or the Kalachuri princes in Madhya Pradesh and for the kings of Karnataka and Odisha. They occupied high official positions and enjoyed land grants to undertake the official functions. As a result of this, there emerged a conflict within the Varna system. The rise of the castes invariably led to a continued conflict between the Brahmins, who felt that their social and administrative position was being challenged. The control over the land records that the Kshatriyas enjoyed created a major source of contention between these two communities. As a result, in all the Brahminical texts, the castes are viewed in a very negative light. For example, lawgiver Yajnavalkya mentioned them as early as 4th century, where he described them as oppressor of the subjects. This trend was followed even in the 12th century. Raj Tarangini of Kalhana condemned the castes, followed by several other subsequent texts. The Varna system was modified due to these several changes that was coming over. Changes were coming over in the position of the Vaishyas as well as the Shudras. The Shudras were no longer the slaves or just the downtrodden one, the artisans or the agricultural laborers. They started tilling lands, substituting the Vaishyas as the tillers of the land. Huen Sang clearly states in his travel accounts that the Shudras were agriculturists. Al-Biruni too pointed out that there was hardly any difference between the Vaishyas and the Shudras. They interacted freely, intermixed in their social setup, visited each other's house, and so on. Often we find that the Skanda Puran is describing a Shudra as the giver of grains or onnoda and householder or grihastha. Another text by Hemchandra defines the farmers and the cultivators as Kutumbis. These Kutumbins they also become a part of the caste structure along with the Malakars, Kayasthas, the Napito, Gopa, and so on. Now I'll come to the viewpoint of Professor Ranavir Chakraborty, who is highlighting the position of the Brahmanas within the Varna Jati order. According to Professor Chakraborty, the Brahmins enjoyed the most honored position in the society during this time, and in fact, even before the early medieval period, from the classical times also, the Brahmins had been enjoying a sort of a very high position in the society. In view of their exalted ritual status in the society as the highest educated section of the society, that is, they could interpret the Vedic, the Epico-Puranic and several Bhakti textual traditions. So automatically, these Brahmins, they enjoyed an advantageous position compared to the lower jatis or the lower orders in this system. The importance of the Brahmanas was conditioned by the factor that there was a rise in the number of the regional ruling houses during this period. And now all these regional ruling houses, they required a kind of religious sanction. This religious sanction was provided by the Brahmin priests. They performed elaborate rituals, yajnas, and through these yajnas, the ruling house was often connected with an antique ancestry, and some localized bhakti cult was established as a state cult connected with that royal house. So there was a close connection between these regional powers and the Brahminical groups. There is a coordination between them, each helping the other in building up a new social order. In this context, I should mention the position of the Rajgurus. They were becoming extremely important. Apart from the Rajgurus, there we can find the Mathadhipatis, who also enjoyed an exalted social position and were patronized by the regional rulers. Those who were the managers of the temples, that is, those who ran the temples and the properties of the temples and other things, other administrative things connected with the temples, they were known as the Sthanapatis. Further, these Brahman community, they were also closely connected with the education system, since several colleges were connected with these temples where education was imparted. In this context, I would further mention that the Brahmin community, to a large number, they came from the Madhya Desha, the center of Brahminical culture in the Gangetic Valley, claiming their affiliation to specific Vedic Samhita and migrating to a variety of areas, both far and near. All these Brahmin communities, they established or they claimed to be a close associate of a particular Vedic Samhita. The increase in the number of Brahminical Gotras, Provaras, Bangshas and Ganas refer to their distinctiveness according to their lineages and according to their connection with those particular Vedic Samhitas. In this context, I would refer to one work of R.N. Nandi. R.N. Nandi is pointing out that during this period, some non-Brahmin communities also, they adopted Brahminical Gotras and similar affiliations to Vedic Samhitas. And the example of the Boyas in Nellore, Guntur region can be cited in this context. The Puranas, like the Matsya Purana or the Skanda Purana and other law books, commentaries on Manusmriti, all elaborate the special rights and prerogatives of the Brahmanas. The inscriptions too portray the Brahminical prerogatives in the similar light. So definitely the Brahmins enjoyed an exalted status in the social order. In conclusion, I would like to point out certain facts. So, Varna Jati framework of the early medieval Indian society was definitely not free from contradictions. Rigid fourfold Varna model was not fully accepted both by the anthropologists, sociologists and the historians alike. Number of jatis increased in a consistent way, ignoring the classical fourfold Varna model. Marxist historian R.S. Sharma and historian Professor Ranabir Chakraborty both highlight the varied aspects of the Varna Jati system, including the importance of the Brahmanas and the non-Brahmanas in the social framework. Finally, one has to accept the theory of proliferation of castes, denying the rigid fourfold Varna order. Last but not the least, outside the streamlined Varnas or Jati order, there remained the Aranya, the forest, a space for the renounced, the exiled, the dangerous wild animals, and their domesticators and hunters. This space was inhabited by the nomadic hunter-gatherers who did not belong to the structured state society. Katha Shorit Sagar described such people as Bhilas, Pulindas, and Shabaros, who in course of time found acceptance and provided loyal service to the state order. Thank you.